The second fly we're going to tie for the beginning fly tyers course is the woolly bugger, which is the big brother to the woolly worm that we tied in the first segment. I like this as a second fly because it allows us to review all of the concepts and techniques that we used in tying the woolly worm, and it also allows us to add two new techniques, one being tailing a fly and the second adding weight to a fly. So let's start our thread on the hook. We've got a streamer hook here, and we're going to create our thread base the same way that we did with the woolly worm, from the eye of the hook all the way back to the bend. Okay, that looks about good. Now we're going to clip our tag end off. And the first thing we're going to do is add a tail to this fly. Now, a tail to a fly is any material that's tied at the bend of the hook that sticks out or points toward the bend of the hook. For this particular fly, for the woolly bugger, we're going to use a marabou plume, which is a nice, soft, fuzzy type of a feather. It'll give the fly some good movement in the water. Now, the way to do this is you're going to take your marabou plume and you're going to stroke it so that you can get the tips, the end of the feather, under control. And the length of our tail for this fly is going to be about the length of the hook shank, between the length of the total hook and the length of the hook shank. So again, you stroke your fibers out, kind of get them under control, measure it for length, lay it along the shank of the hook. That looks pretty good. And now you're going to rest this back at the bend of the hook at your tie-in point and switch hands, gathering all that material and the hook shank between your fingers. And we're going to secure it in place with a pinch wrap. So you roll your thumb back, bring your thread up, press the material against your forefinger, roll your thumb forward, roll your forefinger back just a little bit, let that thread go slack, slide it down along the back of the hook shank, pinch it all together, and give it a little tug. And you're going to do that probably 3 or 4 times. There's a lot of material here that you want to secure down. So you want to make sure that you have enough pinch wraps so that when you let go, it's going to maintain its place on the hook. So that's about 4 pinch wraps. Let's let go. And it looks like we did pretty good. Now I'm going to hold that tail just to get a little more control over it. And I'm just going to make a few more securing wraps over top of the wraps that I just made, just to make sure that's not going to go anywhere. Now if I grab my butt end of the feather and give it a little tug, the tail's not moving, so I have everything secured down pretty well. And I'm going to come in with my scissors and I'm going to clip all this excess out of the way. And we can try to clean that up just a little bit. And then we'll make a few more wraps just to secure those cut ends down along the hook, which will really nail it into place. So that's the process of applying a tail to a fly. Let's bring our thread back to the tie-in point. And now we're going to add some weight to the fly. Now there's several different ways to add weight to a fly. In this particular case, we're going to take a little bit of lead wire. In this case, this is actually lead-free wire, more environmentally friendly. And we're going to pull off a strip of that. And it's soft enough that you can just clip it right off and just break it right off. And we're going to apply a layer of lead wire along the shank of the hook, which will add some weight to the fly. Then when you fish it, it'll sink a little bit quicker. Now the way to do this is you're going to take your lead wire, or lead-free wire in this case, hold it at a 45-degree angle behind the hook, and just start wrapping it in touching turns along the shank of the hook. And we're going to apply this along most of the shank. We don't want to crowd the eye of the hook, but we do want to get a lot of lead on there so that, or a lot of wire on there so that you have a good amount of weight to the fly. So that looks pretty good right there. Now again, this is very soft wire, so to break it off, come in and pinch it with your thumb and just give a little tug and it'll clip right off. You can clip the front end off, do the same thing with the back end, give a little pinch, and give a little tug. And there you go. Now this wire, it's nice and soft, so it does mold itself nicely to the shank of the hook. So you don't really have to secure it in with thread. What I do like to do, however, is to now take a drop of head cement. So I'm going to take my head cement and take a toothpick, and we're going to get a drop of head cement, and we're going to coat that lead wire with the head cement. Now the cement will seep down in between the wraps that you made, and it'll dry real nice, and that just gives your fly a little bit more durability. It'll kind of keep that lead wire in place just a little bit better. And that's one way to add weight to a fly. Now at this point, we're going to just continue our steps in the same fashion that we did for the woolly worm. We're going to take a piece of chenille as our body. We're going to strip off some of the fibers with your thumb and finger at one end to expose the thread core. And you're going to attach that to the back of the hook. Secure it in with some wraps. Okay, so there's your body material. Got a couple little marabou fibers in there. We'll clear those out. And we're going to take, in this case, a grizzly hackle. When we tied the woolly worm, we used olive, chenille, and a furnace hackle. For this fly, this is going to be a black and grizzly woolly bugger. So we have black chenille, and we're going to use this nice grizzly feather. You're going to hold it by the tip. You're going to stroke those fibers down toward the butt end so that they stick out on a bit of a right angle to the quill. And you tie this in by the tip. So we're going to strip those fibers back. Place that. Let's clear some of this out of the way here. Get this guy out of the way. Place your feather along the hook. And you can make a loose wrap, or you could do a pinch wrap, whichever you prefer. And you're going to secure the tip end of that feather right up along the shank of the hook. Tie it in nice. I tend to like to make some wraps over my lead to secure that feather in nice. Again, you want your flies to be durable. You don't want them to fall apart after a cast or two. So now that we have that secured, we'll take some of these, come in here and clip off this tip, clip off the excess. And now just kind of spiral wrap your thread back and forth over your lead wire a little bit. Again, thinking durability, that will just help to keep everything where you want it. And now when you get up to the front here, what else I like to do, you'll see there's a little bump here where the lead wire ends and the hook shank continues. Make a few wraps in that space to create a little bit of a taper, so that there's a more smooth transition from your lead wire down to the shank of the hook. And that'll just prevent any unsightly bumps from being formed in your fly as you wrap your body and wrap your hackle. And again, we're just going to make our wraps now. We're going to tie our body and tie our feather in, or wrap our body and wrap our feather in the same way that we did for the woolly worm. So we're going to pull our feather forward, take our chenille. You're going to make your first wrap of chenille behind your feather, pull your feather back, make your next wrap in front, and now you're just going to continue to wrap in touching turns your chenille body up to where your thread is hanging there, just behind the eye. Again, you don't want to crowd the eye. You slide down over that bump that you made, that taper, so that it fits in there just nicely. And then you tie off your chenille with a couple of wraps of thread. And now we can clip our chenille, excess chenille out of the way. Couple more wraps just to make sure it's secure and to create a little thread base over which you can tie your feather down. Now you take your hackle, stroke your fibers back as you wrap, so that they all orient towards the back of the fly. And you start wrapping your feather. And again, if you do this right, the quill of the feather should sink down in between the wraps of chenille that you made. My feather's twisting a little bit here, so come in here and just reorient it. And you're going to wrap it in a palmer fashion, which is more or less a spiral fashion, not in touching turns, but in a spiral fashion up the shank of the hook. And you'll see as we're going here, my quill is sinking nicely in between my wraps of chenille. It's a stroke and wrap. Continue this right up to the eye of the hook, or again just behind the eye of the hook. Stroke and wrap. And we're almost there. And then if you have enough feather left over, you can make 1 or 2 extra wraps in touching turns at the front of the fly, just to give it a little more of a shapely appearance. Hold your feather forward, bring your thread underneath it to trap it against the hook. Switch hands, make a few more wraps to really nail it into place there. And now we can clip off our excess feather. And again, if you can get it to the point where you can hold this feather up to trim it, then you don't worry about nicking your thread. So you want to be careful not to cut off your thread as you cut off your material. And now we make just a few more wraps of thread here to form a head and nail down the rest of this stuff. I got a little bit too much quill up in the front there, but we'll cover it with some thread. We'll be okay. And create a nice little head, holding the rest of this material out of the way as you do so. And now we're going to apply our whip finish. So again, we take our whip finish tool, and if you need review of this, you can always refer to the 3 basic techniques segment on how to apply a whip finish. 4, 5. Pull that down, and we lance our thread off. And there you have a very nice woolly bugger. And in the process, you've learned 2 new techniques. 1, how to apply a tail to a fly, and 2, how to add weight to a fly.